Adobe Illustrator's Eyedropper tool is a lot more powerful than just the simple eyedropper tool that you have in Photoshop. Mainly Photoshop deals with pixels, they're raster-based images, and so the eyedropper tool grabs color. In Illustrator, which are vector-based, there's a lot more information in those objects. All of that can be picked up and pushed from the eyedropper tool to other objects or other text. The eyedropper tool is located over here in the toolbar. Some shortcuts. If you hold Alt, then your icon will switch sides and be loaded with ink. That means you are about to push information to something. If you hold Shift, then you are going to be only sampling color of whichever is active, of your fill, or if your stroke is on top, then that will be the active one. If you hold the space bar, then you can move around without leaving the tool, and once you let go of the space bar, it goes back. And if you hold Command on a Mac, then it turns into your black arrow tool, and as soon as you let go, it goes back. So if you wanted to select something, you could press Command, select it, let go, and you're back to your tool. If you hold Alt, it is loaded. Notice that there is a little bit of ink in that icon now. So this is what you will pull, and if you hold Alt, this is what you can push, and it pushes the fill and the stroke. So for example, if I wanted to select this, and I wanted to do what you do in Photoshop and just grab one of these colors, I can go over and I can, this is an image that I drew with some colored pencils recently, so I can grab these colors. Now notice that the object that I have selected is changing color. Now this image does not have a stroke because it's an image, so it's only changing the fill even though the stroke is on top. If I hold Shift, then it will push those colors, notice right over here, to what is active. One quick thing when you're working with images, and you're point sampling it with images, is to remember that these are pixels. So you notice the giant squares here? That's because I've zoomed way in. But each one of these is a square or pixel of color. So if you double click on this to bring the menu up, the point sample is going to give you a sample of one square of color. A 3x3 average is usually a good way to go, or a 5x5 average. What that does, if you change this like this, then this is going to give you an average of those colors rather than, this particular color. There are a lot of controls in the eyedropper tool. Anything that is selected here, it will grab and apply. Anything that is deselected, it will ignore. So if I come over here like this and I want to grab this guy, notice that it grabs the fill and the stroke of this object, because this object has a fill and a stroke. The next object that I create will retain those settings that I already had. Now if you're in the eyedropper tool and you want to select something, you just hold Command. That switches you to your black arrow tool momentarily, and once you let go, you go back. Much like the spacebar switches you to the hand and you can move around, Command switches you to the black arrow tool. Then you come over and you can just pick things. And as you grab them, it will change those colors. If it has a stroke, it will apply that stroke. If you don't want the stroke of something, then you just make sure that your fill or your stroke, whichever one you want to change, is on top, and then you hold Shift, and it will only change to the color that you have. Now, if I wanted to do the same thing, let's say that I wanted to come in here like this, and I wanted this blue outline that is a stroke to be the fill color of these letters. Well, that's easily done. Come in here like this. Because my fill is on top and is active and my stroke is not, I can mouse over this and hold Shift, and Shift will fill just the color of whatever I click on, whether it's a fill or a stroke, into whichever one of these is active, fill or stroke. Let's look at what else it does. It also works with text and transparencies and the thickness of strokes. So just like when you double click over here, it can grab all of these things. It can do patterns and everything else. So Simply put, if I grab this circle here, then notice that it becomes more or less opaque and changes the color. Now if I just want just the color of this object, I can hold Shift, and if I had, it'll retain the transparency. So let's say I'm at 100%, and I'm holding Shift. Now I can just grab just those colors. If I let go of Shift, it'll grab all of the attributes that I have selected, including the stroke. So a bigger stroke, a smaller stroke, just a stroke. It'll grab all of those things. The text will do the same thing. So if I come over here, it will become semi-transparent. Let me drop something behind it so you can see that. Oops. If the opacity is all the way to 100, then I can come in and I can just grab the color by holding Shift. Same thing. If I'm holding Shift, I can also grab the color of the stroke by clicking on the path of the object. If I have text and I want this text to match all of the attributes of this text, notice that little T. I can just click and it takes on the font and the size and the spacing, everything that's over here in the character palette, the paragraph palette. If there are character styles applied, which there are in this case, it takes those on. Notice how it changes sizes. It'll retain the stroke and the fill. It'll do all of those things. Now, the eyedropper, that's the pull feature. If you hold Alt, it will also push. So if I come over here like this, and I load my eyedropper with this, I notice that I'm grabbing font information because I have that little T, but I want to push that to this word here. If I hold Alt, notice that it shifts, and it's full now, and click and drag, then it applies that information that I have selected to those words. If I come over here and deselect, grab my eyedropper tool again, I'm going to load with this, then I hold Alt. I can do just several letters in those words. I don't even have to do all of the words. So I have the option of highlighting something and then clicking on my eyedropper tool and changing it. Or I have the option of loading my eyedropper tool with something, holding Alt, and then clicking and dragging to push that information. Now if this whole text box is selected and I click on one of these, it applies that text information to the entire text box. So that's pretty much it. Remember that Alt will push, Shift will eliminate everything except grabbing the color, and if you're in this tool and you want to move around, you can hit spacebar and move around. If you want to get to your black arrow tool so that you can select something, you hit Command and you're good to go.